I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
So the Holy Spirit didn't move
Oh.
you?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I feel like, oh, if I reach out to them, they'll never respond because they're so busy and they're doing so much stuff, and you were in that category.
Right, right.
And so, but when I finally said, okay, I just reached 10,000 subs. Maybe I'm big enough now that he'll
It
notice me.
I
And
honestly, I don't have, like, limits on, I don't have a limit. I am extremely busy, which is why you were wondering, is he gonna show up? Because I didn't email back the last email, and I should have. I get 100 emails all day, every day, and, but believe it or not, my advice to any new YouTuber who might be watching this or someone who's in your audience that has a YouTube channel that's smaller, just do it anyway. Trust me, because you were asking, I think, in the email, like, how do you get all these academics? Well, I don't shy away. I do
Mhm.
not shy away. I act like I'm the biggest person in the room. Not really, but
Mm.
I just, when I started, I didn't have subscribers. I didn't have 10,000, and I just started to email academics and reach out and create connections. And many of them, believe it or not, don't care about the hundreds of thousands. They like you for you. And so I'm
Oh,
glad you reached out.
okay, very good. Yeah, you've had a number of guests on that I was fascinated with, and I would love to reach out to, one of which is Dr. Miller. I watched what he had to say about some of the mythological roots of Christianity, and I bought his book, and I only got about a third of the way through it because it is not written for a lay audience.
Right, right.
And after about a third of the way, I gave up.
Oh, it is so hard to read, and he
It
knows that.
is.
He knows, and he told me when he wrote it, he
Mhm.
was aiming for the elite upper echelon academic. He was aiming for the highest of the high that you could get in terms of rigor and intelligence. And I'm like, man, we need a popular level, which is why I made a documentary version of the video of the book. And
Mm.
if you haven't watched it, it's like 4.5 hours long. It's kind of quick, and so it doesn't give you time to absorb everything in there. But I took his book and I actually synthesized the section that goes through the different alphabetical order, chapter 2, where he shows the gallery,
Mhm.
which is, in a nutshell, we're probably talking beyond our audience's awareness of what's going on. For some of them, they may not know
Oh,
what we're talking about. So,
thank you. Yes, let's let them know what we're talking about. Thank you
yes.
so much.
So, simply put, in a nutshell, Richard C. Miller is a brilliant mind who crosses between Bible scholarship and classics, meaning he has studied the Greco Roman world, Roman religion, Greek religion, and the history surrounding that. And he really loved capitalizing on authors that wrote around, before, during, and after the rise of Christian literature. What he discovered, in a nutshell, again, this is very deep, complex nature of discussion. He starts his book talking about this famous Christian apologist called Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr is a well-known Christian who is named Martyr because he dies. He's put to death by a Roman emperor. And he writes a letter to the emperor trying to give Christianity antiquity in line with Judaism, which Rome already saw as an ancient religion and were willing to give them credibility on the block, so to speak. Like, you can legally practice your religion. We're okay with this religion. It's not disruptive. It's, you guys stay in your corner. You take Sabbath off. You don't bother the rest of society trying to shove it down everyone's throats, which Christianity at the outset was disruptive. It was
Mm.
disruptive for its members and how they acted in society. And this was important as well with Bacchic worship, which we were talking about before we hit live, but that gets
Mhm.
off of Richard C. Miller's work, and we could talk about that in the future. But Bacchic, Dionysian mystery cult religion. Now, Miller highlights some very interesting words that Justin Martyr says. And he says something to the effect of, we believe, writing to the emperor, we believe nothing different. In fact, let me get the quote, because I think this is a very important point. I don't want to butcher. Justin Martyr, we believe nothing different. It's in my Google already saved. This quote. So in his first apology, he says, and when we say also that the Word, who is the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, there's the virgin birth, and
Mhm.
Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified, died, and rose again, death, burial, resurrection, and ascended into heaven, Ascension, which we know from the book of Acts, right? You've heard all of this. We propound. That's the central everything you could say. I mean, you might want to add he walked on water or some other thing, but like the fact that he was immaculately conceived, or not necessarily, I'll just say this. He was virginally birthed, because now you get into immaculate conception, which is a different issue. So I shouldn't have used that term, but he has a virgin birth, a divine birth. He lives, he's a teacher, he lives, he dies, he rises again, resurrection, which is super central, and then he ascended. Justin says, we propound, we say nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter, sons of Zeus. Jupiter is Zeus in Rome. They just took the pantheon and renamed it for the most part.
Right.
For you know how many sons of your esteemed writers ascribe to Jupiter or Zeus. Mercury, the interpreting word and teacher of all. You remember the word, the logos. In the beginning was the logos, John chapter 1. Mercury was seen this way.
Wow.
But it wasn't just Mercury. Dionysus was also considered a logos. So there's a lot of interesting things about how these pagan religions used very similar rhetoric and had similar philosophies. In fact, the first people who condemned idols and false gods and all that were the Greeks. It was not Jews. It was not Judaism. It was the Greeks who came along really pushing this idea. And if you go far enough back, you'll find in Egypt, there was a pharaoh, Akhenaten, who had the Aten, the one, and it was the supreme god. He even went around chiseling the names of other deities out. Like, he disrupted society with his monotheistic tendencies. I'll call it that. So he says, Mercury, the interpreting word and teacher of all. Asclepius, I don't know how to pronounce it properly in the Roman, but it's Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, who, though he was a great physician, was struck by a thunderbolt and so ascended to heaven. And Bacchus, too, that's Dionysus, after he had been torn limb from limb. Pausing there just to say, being torn limb from limb, this idea of him being ripped to shreds by the Titans is similar to Osiris, who was cut into 14 pieces. Like, the myths overlap. That gets off to a tangent. And Hercules, when he had committed himself to the flames to escape his toils, and the sons of Leda, and the Dioscuri, and Perseus, son of Danae, and Bellerophon, who though sprung from mortals, rose to heaven on the horse Pegasus. For what shall I say of Ariadne and those who, like her, have been declared to be set among the stars? And what of the emperors who die among yourselves, whom you deem worthy of deification, and in whose behalf you produce someone who swears, catch this, he has seen, eyewitness, the burning Caesar rise to heaven from the funeral pyre? An eyewitness to the ascension of the Caesar. And there's also eyewitnesses who claim they saw the post-mortem Caesar visit them on roads, just like Jesus. So anyway, Justin
Martyr wrote about the ascension of the Caesar?
Do what?
Justin Martyr wrote about the ascension of the Caesar?
Justin Martyr literally says in his own words, he says right here, in this, I could send you the link too, but it's just in one apology, the quote specifically, first apology of Justin Martyr addressed to the Emperor Antonius Pius. And I'm not sure the exact block. This is easy to look up. I just went to the quickest one that was right here that gets the block of quote. He says that, and in whose behalf, so he's talking about, what of the emperors who die among yourselves, whom you deem worthy of deification, meaning they become a god, and in whose behalf you produce someone who swears he has seen the burning Caesar rise to heaven from the funeral pyre? He's ascending. And what kind of deeds are recorded of each of these reputed sons of Jupiter? Talking about Zeus. He then later condemns the actions of these characters. Zeus's sexual immorality, because every time you turn around, Zeus is sleeping, or even in a case, the R word. I don't want to do it for YouTube, but the R word with many women. Like, and so these Christians, they're not the first ones who condemn the behavior of these gods. Plato did this. The Greek philosophers themselves condemned their own myths. Then Christians just picked up the torch. But Justin Martyr does say that there are people who come forward as witnesses claiming they saw the ascension of Caesar into heaven.
I find that fascinating because I'd always been led to believe that even if these myths were out there, the Christians didn't know about them, or the Christians didn't believe in that any of those were true, or they never spoke about them because they felt that theirs was the only one.
Yeah, no, they did not deny that theirs was the only one. They only denied the other's validity or truth of it, whether it was on moral grounds or just outright going, those are false and those are demons. Literally, this is my next documentary I'm working on. I call them documentaries. They're all self-made. If I don't have someone edit them, I edit them myself the best I can. And I'm self-taught, not trained, but like in this next one, I call it something, I'm working title is They Lied About Christianity's Pagan Roots. And in it, I'm actually going based off of some of the stuff I mentioned about the cult of Dionysus, the initiation rites of baptism to entering into this cult, which practically makes you like bury and you go through the death of the hero of that cult. Like you die with Dionysus so that you will then unite with this god in this initiation. You will become one with the god in which you are joining this ritual or mystical act that they believed through baptism, water baptism. And this is before Christianity. And Dionysus was an exclusive deity practiced in this particular cult, which got made illegal by the Roman Empire. It disrupted society. Anyway, there's this act within Dionysus behavior. The Maenads practice was called homophagia. And it means to rip the flesh of wild animals. And they were said to have consumed the raw flesh of these animals and drink the blood. Well, where have I heard chew my flesh and drink my blood before? It doesn't come straight from Jesus in the Gospel of John. So now I'm going, okay, I'm looking at PhDs like Dennis MacDonald, who was a Harvard professor, and he moved to Claremont School of Theology and started teaching. He sees overlap between Dionysus and the Bacchae and the New Testament Gospels, Luke, Acts, and John. He's written books on this. Now, this is what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to show that the baptism is a pagan initiation to a mystery religion, that Christianity is a blend of two things: Judaism practices through mysteries and pagan practices, and that there are aspects of the pagan that do not appear in Jewish practices of the mystery. So to try and make this thing, they only are inheriting only Jewish thought here, that's absurd. And that totally ignores the historical evidence. So I don't know. I mean, there's so much I'm trying to do to show the origins, which demystifies and takes away the apologetic of this one's better than the rest. And I think it tears down walls, in my opinion.
I agree.
We're better and all the others are bad and wrong. So I jumped off your point, though, of them claiming exclusivity in the sense that we're the only ones doing this. No, they had to face the facts that their stories were very similar to these already existing ones before theirs came on the scene. So what do? Justin Martyr says, well, the demons knew long ago through the prophecies of Scripture, kind of like the devil knows, the saying that even Satan knows and he trembles, these kinds of things. The demons tremble. Well, he claimed that the demons could read the Scripture and they saw the prophecies of Christ in the Hebrew Bible. And so they modeled these pagan cults. Dionysus is one of them in Genesis 49, according to Justin Martyr. There's something about a grapevine and the grapes crushing. And there's something to that in the Hebrew Bible in Genesis. And he says, this is what they crafted the demonic imitation of Christ, making the Dionysus story. We now know the Hebrew Bible does not exist as far back as even the stories of Dionysus. Dionysus is Bronze Age. Our Hebrew Bible, while it claims to be setting back there, is actually written much, much later. So it's a fascinating journey learning all of this.
That is a fascinating journey. Wow. How did you get started with all of this?
I was a radical fundamentalist Christian who believed that Jesus was coming back any freaking moment. And he did nothing but try to get everyone around him to take serious this idea that I had in my head and really tried to live it himself. And it made me someone that oftentimes they didn't want to be around, but they loved. And they didn't want to have to hear again the preaching, again because I was so obsessed with thinking that I'm saved now, and my goal is to save others because the end is going to happen any moment now. And
Right.
so I think that I was so delusionally caught up in this, so obsessed, because I'm already an extreme person. Notice that my obsession hasn't left. The obsession has shifted topic. It's shifted focus. And so I've just turned it toward, okay, I was abused by this philosophy, this idea, and these concepts. Now let me find out where these ideas come from. I need to know what had me so captivated for over a decade of my earlier life, even into adulthood. And then my addiction to drugs and how that coalesced with this. And in fact, my leaving the religion, finding freedom, I think played a significant part to my long-term success as someone who has almost 9 years off heroin. I was injecting heroin and in
While
trying
you were a believer?
huh?
While you were a believer?
While I was, well, you're never not, it's not like I didn't believe. I believed, but it's very complicated to say how the mind, it's like saying the Christian who pretend a Christian went in and did what they would say is a no-no and purchased a prostitute or went and did cocaine or something, like, therefore they don't believe Jesus anymore. They may not be living like they believe in Jesus, but they still believe Jesus is the way. They're just ashamed of their behaviors, or they don't know how to balance what's going on in their behaviors and in their beliefs. And I would say I always had believed that Jesus was true, even if I had my doubts from time to time. It was just, I
wasn't sure if maybe you had converted to Christianity, because of your drug addiction or something like that.
No. In fact, my story is a little reverse from most. People get to Christianity to escape drug addiction. They say they found the Savior who helped them and stuff like that. So, and if that's what helps them and it keeps them alive, and it, I'm not against it. I'm really not. I just know that it doesn't need, that's not the necessary thing for me.
That's where I am. If this gives you strength, fine, but know that it's not really true, and that strength is in you. And how much more empowering is it to realize that you had the strength all along, and you really can do this on your own.
Yes, that's really what it boiled down to. The analogy I'd give, that famous painting with the 2 footprints in the sand on the beach. When there were 2 footprints, I was the one who carried you. And it's like, actually, believe it or not, it was you the whole time, and everyone around you that helped play a part in that process. And so that's how I look at it now. I didn't, when I was first getting clean, I thought maybe this is providence, this is God and stuff. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And blessed be he as a believer. He sometimes comes on, and he's been asking questions, but I've been ignoring him because they've been completely off topic. You and I have a great deal in common. One of the things that I said in a recent video, what people often ask me, why do I make content? Why do I do this? And I said, because when I was a believer, I led Bible studies. I went on short-term mission trips. I did everything I could to try to bring people into the faith. I have sins to atone for. And my channel is my atonement.
Right. I get it. I don't know if that was ever my motivation. Like, for me, I don't carry a shame or guilt. I mean, maybe I do feel bad about how abusive my rhetoric was with hell and the fear and stuff like that. But like, I would say that everyone who knows me now, everyone who had to deal with that knows now. In fact, there's people who were never as extreme in Christianity, were believers, but I would like press these issues of sincere, serious, take this serious. Like we
Mhm.
need to take this serious and believe this, are now like trying to get me back, right? They're trying like, dude, come on, man, you've gone too far. And I don't feel that they feel at all like negative of any of my earlier impact. They prefer me be that guy because they believe. And I have to explain and dispel some of this and break down the human fingerprint of the whole thing. And it's just not something that I think many of them will ever be able. It's sad because when I talk with them, it's not about intelligence. It's not about
Right, right.
bring every piece of evidence to show
Mhm.
you why this is no different than Islam or any of the claims of Judaism or any of the claims. I can bring up any religion. I can show you the evidence. It's not about that. There is a deeper, much deeper psychological, and who knows what other environmental. It's like a deep bias dogma that's there, and I cannot get that. I don't know how to get around or underneath that to persuade anyone with reason, logic, or argumentation. And I think there's something deeper to that because we're all going to die.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what answers do you have me in replacing this idea that I'm going to live forever one day? What can you give me? I can't give you that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to be with you holding your brain's hand as you're dying. Like,
Mhm.
so the fear and that there's so much in it hijacks that, I think. And I don't know how to, I can't give you anything that gives you that joy and complimenting that. It's something that I personally had to accept. And it's
Yeah.
just, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
difficult.
Mhm. For the most part, most of the people that I talked to about and tried to lead to Christ were all adults. And for those, I'm unapologetic. But the three people that I feel the most, I don't want to say shame, that's not quite the right word, but the three people I feel most guilty about are my own children because I sent them to Christian schools and I gave them what was considered, some of the best education available, but it was also extremely limiting because, you had to believe the Bible and you have to believe these things about evolution,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh gosh,
Are
how
any of
could
them
I have
still
been so
stuck?
blind?"
Are any of them still stuck in that
What
mindset?
one of them is, the oldest is still a devout believer. The youngest is the one that brought me to atheism.
Oh, okay, okay.
Uh, and one thing that was funny is he deconverted about 6 months before he graduated from high school, and he was really worried that the administration was gonna find out that he didn't believe the garbage anymore and
Oh,
kick him
wow.
out of school. And, he was months away from getting his diploma. We could have gone to the public school, but we really didn't wanna change schools at this point. There was also another reason we didn't wanna change schools, and that was my son's best friend was transgender. And my son was the only person at the school that would accept his transgender friend.
Uh,
And if my son went to the public school, his friend would be isolated. So that was the other reason he wanted to stay where he was. But
wow.
I remember that when we got down to the wire and we went to graduation, they didn't give them the diplomas at graduation. We had to go pick up the diplomas on the Monday after, and we're like, okay, we got the diploma in hand. Now we can admit that we are unbelievers.
Yeah, it's over. It's over now. I don't have to. Isn't this sad that you have to do that? I hope that many of our communities, this is my personal, like, as I've entered into many of the atheist communities, I hope the reverse, we don't do the reverse. It
Mhm,
seems like a human thing, right? But like, I want atheists to be more open to
mhm,
letting the believers come in and out. Don't put up walls that are so strong that you can't cross those barriers and come in and out, because we don't want to practice that same kind of us versus them behavior.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I've actually fought many atheists who have been derogatory toward Christians in my groups on Facebook or even in my live chats when I've noticed that just because I identify with you on an ideological basis or even philosophically or something to that effect does not mean I appreciate the rhetoric or abuse that you're doing towards these people and not giving them a chance, because I was once a Christian. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't know. Like, you could have been saying this, but it wasn't about, am I smart enough to learn this stuff? There's a lot of other factors involved. And I don't think if we're going to be a little more patient, empathetic, that's what I'd like to see more of. So that's my personal take. I think that sometimes it's, if you even watch like some of those call-in shows, it's like almost abusive conversations that are happening. And I'm like, okay, I don't like that. It's not my style. And yeah, I don't know. I like to try to meet people a little where they're at, but I don't have time to do that either. I'm like, what's the next deep dive I'm getting lost into with information on doing a video on? So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I don't know. Yeah. Someone said, what's the topic? I'm like, hold on. Blessed be he. Will Derek ever debate Darth Dawkins? No, I won't even talk to the guy. I have no interest in a conversation with that guy. So it's not about, I don't even do debates, by the way. That's another thing for me. I'm not saying I won't one day eventually tap into that, but like debates are rhetorical games and not necessarily about evidence and what the case is. Yeah, you're trying to bring arguments, but if your opponent is wrong, but they're just good at bullshitting, they're
Mhm.
great word salad, you know, like what's the point of going in there to abuse yourself for 3 hours to deal with someone who's rhetorically playing games, and you're just gonna, you pull up sources, it's going to be ignored, it's going to be denied, it's going to be found ways to get around it. It's like, what's the point? And I'm not interested.
I had one debate that was quite interesting because we actually came to a consensus on the topic at the end of the debate. Um, because the debate topic was, should transgender women be allowed to compete with other women? And because of the way my opponent worded the topic, I brought up, okay, what about a beauty contest? What
Right.
about an essay contest? What about a cooking contest? Should we bar transgender women from all types of competition?
Right.
And my opponent agreed, yeah, obviously that's ridiculous. And my opponent brought up rugby. I know nothing about rugby.
It's all physical. That's the reason I think they're trying to bring it up, is they're trying to come at it from more of a biological standpoint and saying,
Mhm.
does this person have a natural advantage? So if
Yes.
you weren't
Yes.
even dealing with this issue, we were focusing on just like MLB baseball for so long. It is illegal in MLB to do testosterone, to do steroids. Like, you cannot do that. It gives you an upper hand without the issue of trans, like just purely based on men playing with men kind of thing, right? And it gives that cutting edge to that person, a little superior advantage. So they're trying to use an example of a sport where it's almost purely physical and genetically advantaged, or even advantages in that way. Then yeah, I could see someone making a case going, hold on, maybe we should have a category or something where we don't have someone with the genetic advantage on that level. But
Right.
to act like that needs to be universal, I think there's ways that we could solve this.
Well,
But
actually, what we ended up coming to a consensus to, as I said, if you're willing to let trans women compete in anything other than rugby, I'm willing to let them be banned from rugby. And he said, fine with him. And that's where we left it. We ended up coming to a
yeah. I mean,
consensus.
you could probably come up with other examples, but it's just, yeah, I mean, they ban, they're going to ban men, right, from other sports with men, like the way it's always just been classically, if they are doing anything that gives them that edge, right? So
Mhm.
um it's interesting to hear that kind of debate took place. It's yeah, it's usually a right-wing thing though too, right, to like slam, like, this is a good talking point to just go against all trans people because of sports, and
Mhm.
it's really a distraction, I think, from the broader issues. But anyway.
Okay, blessed be he has a decent question that really is on topic for us, and that
Okay.
is, are you a Jesus Historist, Derek?
I am, but I say that not as it's like I know. I lean there was a guy, but I'm practically in the same boat, practically, as mythicist, in the sense that the narratives about this guy didn't happen. Does that mean that, and if there are aspects of the narratives that go back to a historical hearsay, memory, oral story, whatever, I can't know that. I can't be confident in knowing that goes back. And there are tools that some scholars use to try and determine if this goes back to Jesus, if he said this or didn't say this. And I've heard all the pros and cons and the yeses and the nos. And in my mind, not all of them, but I've heard enough of them to know that we cannot be confident in knowing for sure. There's some statements that come from the Gospels may actually go back, and I could lean into some of those. I'll give you an example. The Gospel of Matthew. In the Gospel of Matthew, there's one passage where Jesus is speaking to the disciples and says, look, you will not have gone through all the houses in Israel before the Son of Man comes. Now, experts in Matthew will say, the Son of Man is not Jesus in this case. This is a reference to Daniel's Son of Man, which later Jesus becomes fused with the Son of Man, depending on the text. But like, he is not the Son of Man that is supposed to come on the clouds, that's supposed to usher in the end, and that they, the disciples, are going to go preaching in Israel, and that they will not have even gone through all the houses in Israel before the end happens. Mm-hmm. Now, that's an odd thing, because at the end of this gospel, he then gives a commission and now go into the whole world. Hold on, dude. You just said they will not even have gone to all the houses in Israel, and now you're telling them go throughout the whole world. There's two messages seemingly happening here, and scholars think that's a fossil. Albert Schweitzer was one of the first Protestant academics who noticed this and said, look, this seems like it might go back to Jesus. By the way, we could thank Protestants for critical scholarship, because they were using it against the Roman Catholic Church.
Okay, that makes sense.
It started that way, yeah. Protestants debunked the miracle claims of the saints and stuff. Mm-hmm. This is all back with Martin Luther, John Calvin, these guys. They were debating as Catholics, started to question their own tradition, and Protestantism took that scalpel from just the Roman Catholic Church and their claims, then started applying it on their Bibles. And they started going, hold on, did Moses really say this? Because it says, and then Moses died. Did Moses say, and then Moses died? No, Moses didn't say, and then Moses died, or these examples you could give. But yeah, so to the question, I think there was probably a guy who was mythologized, but I really don't know. I lean yes, but I don't know that. And one of the things recently that makes me keep questioning it again is this mystery cult thing. Mm-hmm. Because Paul has this initiation into the Christ cult. And if I look at all the other mystery religions that are around at the time, every central character, Attis, Orpheus, Bacchus, or Dionysus, you name the mystery religion, those characters in it, while they probably believed they existed, are fictional. So I don't, like, when I look at a close comparison, Jesus is also a strange mystery-like cult in its initiation and its practices. And so I tend to think he did because it's so close to when the narratives of him are being written. And it's not, we can't find other examples. More often than not, they mythologized people that really existed, like the Caesars and stuff like that. So, but I can't know that. Mm-hmm. Sorry if that's a long answer to your question.
I tend to think that, okay, it's certainly possible that there was one person named Jesus, and the stories are all about that one person. But I think it is more likely that there's more than one person that the stories are based on.
Okay.
That, somebody saw preacher X do Y, and somebody else saw, another preacher do something. And then one person heard both the stories and then relates both of the stories as both being Jesus doing those things.
That's possible. there's a lot of scholars right now that are questioning the whole oral tradition, like as if
Mhm.
someone told this story and then this story and then these stories. That probably happened without a doubt. Every cult, every religion like has these things. But a lot of scholars are questioning the whole oral tradition roots to this religion in the sense that the gospels are based off of that. Many of them, and I'm not saying all, you can go to some of the more classical critical scholars that are out there, they probably still hold to this idea of oral tradition being passed along, like Bart Ehrman. He holds to some of this. But the new ones like Robin Faith Walsh and Richard C. Miller, they aren't going to deny this oral tradition, but they would say that the narratives were well thought out, crafted stories. So what do you do with a well-crafted story that's imitating or even in some way influenced by this other story? So the guy himself, I mean, you could say underneath that story, there was a guy, but you can't prove it. And that's the problem with it. It's hard to know what's legend and what's the guy. It
Mhm.
can become
Mhm.
a mirage after a while.
Mhm. Mhm. I think, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, that one of the reasons that it's so difficult to find good scholarship on some of this is that for a long time this was sacrosanct.
Mm,
How dare you question whether or not this really happened? How dare you question whether Paul really wrote even now when I bring up that Paul didn't write most of the epistles, and Christians are saying, well, how dare you say that? Of course he did. And I say that the scholarly consensus is
yeah,
that he didn't. It's they say, oh, and that's just Bart Ehrman. No, it's not just Bart Ehrman.
it's not. No.
There's even believers that say that Paul didn't write those.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love to go, okay, we're trying to follow the evidence, right? No matter what your belief is. To your first point, even now, there are institutions which require a statement of faith being signed. So,
Right.
even to this day, in order for you to go to certain academic institutions on Bible, you have to say, I'm a believer and I'm signing that I am a Christian in order to even go there, which would
Mhm.
then mean what you publish, what you write is analyzed and focused on to the point where you better speak within this bubble. You're allowed to only go to these boundaries. And it's not exclusive to Christianity. Islam has a bigger problem with that.
Mm.
It in especially when you go into the East. Like here in
Mhm.
the West, you have more secular institutions and there are critical scholars who can do that and some of the bigger secular ones. But you better not uh, go against the narrative in that way. As far as your point about consensus, right now there's just like weird tug of war happening where there are certain what you could call radical, and I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but there are radical critical scholars in the sense that are trying to push what we can know about Paul's letters and Paul himself. And
Mhm.
some of them are even going so far as to say, how confident can we be that Paul wrote these seven? And then the other side, which is being critical, is saying maybe not everything in these seven Paul said or wrote, and that some of the church tacked on, but then some of the material in the pseudepigraphal epistles, the forged ones that Bart would call them, there might actually be some content in there that was from Paul. So
Mm.
someone
Mhm.
added to it. And like again, we're dealing with a mess, right? And it's like
Mhm.
how can you be so certain and confident? It isn't the evidence that does that. It's the psychology, it's the narrative, it's the experience. It's all that I think that plays a part in what Christians really hold on to that gives them so much confidence because that's why you hear the typical apologetic spiel. Why would they die for it? And it's like, have you not heard of Peregrinus? Have you not heard of the Greek people who died, the Greek philosophers, the Greek stories that came before in the world in which the Roman Empire, Christianity arose in? There were many martyrs who died for these things. Did you know that Muhammad and his followers in Mecca, before he moved to Medina, were being persecuted, willing to die for their belief? I mean, and clearly many did die. I'm just saying,
Right.
like these arguments, all it says at best is these people were devout. It doesn't prove the validity. It doesn't even help make it more true. 9/11 flight, the people who flew the planes into the buildings, their passion and devoutness to their philosophy does nothing to prove its truth or like, do you now see that happen and go, oh, you know what? I need to know what that guy believes, because if he's willing to do that, it now makes it more plausibly true. Now, to a Muslim, maybe that is extreme, but like not to a Christian. You see, so it's like, whose pair of glasses are you wearing when you're looking at this?
I was just watching a debate between Richard Dawkins and a creationist earlier today, and the creationist asked Dawkins, if Christianity isn't true, why are there so many people in the world that believe in God? How what naturalistic way would people come to believe in God? And Dawkins gave an answer, one answer from psychology and one answer from evolution. And he said, psychologically, it feels good. Telling someone that you're going to see your loved ones again after death, that feels good. And so it's psychologically comforting. And evolutionarily, is that a word?
Yeah.
Um,
I get it.
we want to believe it. It helps us to survive. It helps us to cope. And so, from an evolutionary standpoint, belief in some kind of a supreme being can have some kind of a beneficial effect. But I think that the beneficial effect that we got from it is starting to disappear, because I think one of the advantages of religious belief was being able to explain the unexplainable. And as we are able to explain more and more, I don't think we need gods anymore.
Yeah. There's so much that could be added to this whole notion of what gave rise to belief in God. I interviewed a scholar. I don't know if you ever watched the interview. His name is John Wathy.
No, I didn't see that one.
You should get him on sometime and have a conversation with him, since you love this stuff. And he has one called The Phantom God, and then another one, they're on Amazon. John Wathy, JohnWathey. And he did a presentation on Myth Vision where he goes in and explains that children in the womb are neurologically wired to see faces. I mean, this is part of biology, part of our evolution, to see faces. They get facial recognition and things like this in the womb. But it's not just children, like human children. This is like animals, period, do this. But there are aspects about how we're wired and how we have evolved to be like we are. But the point is, he ultimately says this: when they leave the mother's womb, in the mother's womb, they can hear everything. They pick up the voice. They can almost, they're practically prepared for the world, but they come out crying, desperate for food. And when they cry because they're in pain and they need to eat, and the mother nurtures them, it is a reward system that takes place that they start to expect. We're all now naturally expecting to be taken care of by a being, an agent that is not ourselves, that is beyond our power, our capability. So this is the infancy of the belief in God, according to him, and that we're neurologically wired this way. So there's a pattern that starts to repeat. And what happens when you get older and mom and dad aren't around and you're going through struggles and you're going through tough times, you're looking for a mother or a father in heaven to help you with your needs, just like when you were an infant. So every part of the aspect of belief in a God, a father God, a mother goddess, like all of that can be naturally explained, and it's all inherent. And so when believers go, well, why are we naturally prone to believe in God? Nature itself can explain that. You can look at how humans behave, and when they had their real mother or real father who were part of, especially in a patriarchal society, you're probably going to get the father who's the dominant theme in your belief system. The point is that they were taking care of us when we needed them, and it's beyond our help. Well, when you get older, every single human has things beyond their control that they cannot help. So the natural leap is to go, where's my mother? Where's my father? And you can also add in some strange little twists, like
Mhm.
ancestral worship. And the ancients also thought that their ancestors were still with them. So if you study the science that goes behind when a human is really attached to a mother, a father, a spouse, child, and they die, many psychologists, I think they are, when they
Mhm.
interview them and they ask them what's going on, they go, my child keeps visiting me in my dream, or I saw them, I touched them, they're hallucinating, or they thought they heard them, but they're long gone. So then he uses the phantom limb to prove a point that a person
Mhm.
who has an arm at 20 years of age, they lose their arm. Imagine my arm is chopped off. For years and years and years after I know consciously that my arm is gone, I will sometimes reach to grab something with that arm, forgetting that my arm is missing. And it's a phantom limb. And they've done experiments where your real arm goes behind here, and then they put up a fake arm, and they literally will take a feather and pet both. Now your brain is wired to the fake arm. And literally, you can hit that arm with a hammer, and your brain will feel the pain.
Mhm.
Something that isn't even yours. So when we start learning more about science, I think we'll get closer to solving the riddle of why humans believe gods and demons and ghosts and all of these kind of superstitions that are out there that kind of, you could say, help us, but may actually not always help us. They may
Yes.
actually limit
Yes.
us.
Yes. Yes. That is exactly it for me, is that I don't think I realized how much Christianity was crippling me until I got out of it.
Hmm.
And then suddenly realizing, I can do all this on my own. I don't need a God out there. I don't need to be praying. I don't need to be worshiping. I can do this all on my own.
You know, there's something that I miss though, and this is just being honest as an atheist. I
Mhm.
miss the ideas of tradition. And I wish that we would incorporate traditions like sitting down at a table with your loved ones, like formal traditions. It doesn't need to be superstitious. It doesn't need to be religious. It just traditions. And I feel like sometimes we get so caught up on bucking against the religions we come out of that it's important that we at least have some forms of traditions that we can pass on that are good, formal, keeping us together as humans. Because Americans are really good at, all right, I'm old enough, mom, dad, have a nice life, I'm going on. Whereas half my family is Mexican.
Mm.
My sister's married into a Mexican family. Like my nieces and nephews are Mexican, and they mostly speak English, but there's also some that speak both. And
Mhm.
they're very formal about keeping the family connected, keeping unity, trying to stay close. Whereas the European, I'll say, side is more like, all right, I'm leaving Europe and I'll call you in 20 years when I'm like grown up and have kids. And it's like, we should keep, I don't know. That's my opinion, right? I don't think it should be law. I'm just saying it's important, I think, that there's something I look at even in the Eastern religions when I see the Chinese or Japanese honoring their ancestors that are dead, even not necessarily even having to believe they're there. I told my mom this too. Mom, when you're gone, I'm going to talk to you. I love my
Mhm.
mom so much. I'm going to talk to you, not because I think you're really listening or, it's almost like I'm an ape. I'm an ape on a planet. Give me a break kind of thing. Can I not get a
Mhm.
free pass? I'm not a rational machine just because I become an atheist. I know everything. I need a little humanity here, is all I'm saying. And I think that we shouldn't miss that. We're so caught up fighting a war that we almost make everything irrational, everything shouldn't be practiced, and we shouldn't do that, is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
What are
Mhm.
your thoughts of that?
Well, I think that's a really interesting thought. Having lost both my parents in the last 5 years, or actually, no, I lost my dad about 2.5 years ago. My mom actually died about 10 years ago. And one thing I regret is that my mom didn't live long enough to see me become an atheist, because neither of my parents were believers.
Oh, wow.
And they always thought I was kind of nuts about Christianity. And I wish my mom could have lived long enough to find out that I finally figured it out, that none of that garbage was true. Um, and the big thing that I'm realizing from what you're saying is how disconnected we are as a family, because my mom wanted to be buried in Flathead Lake in Montana because that's where she grew up. And I really resented the fact that my dad went and buried her at a time when he knew I could not go. You know, he waited until 6 months after her death to take and put her ashes in the lake, but he did it 1 month after I had my scoliosis surgery when I couldn't travel, and I had wanted to be there, and I really resented that I wasn't allowed to be there. And my dad actually arranged it in such a way that no one got to go with him. He went by himself.
Right, right.
And when my dad died, it was absolutely ridiculous. You know, my stepmother would not even tell me when they were going to cremate him. She wouldn't tell me what funeral home he was at, but I figured that out for myself. Um, and I asked her what she was planning to do, and she's with my dad's ashes, and she said, "Well, I'm just going to put them on the mantle and leave them there with his picture." And okay, fine, you know, that's what she wants to do. Um, but 3 months after he died, she sold the house, and then a couple months after that, I got an email from my brother saying, "I've got dad's ashes, who wants them?" I said, "I want them."
Wow.
Because my parents were married for over 50 years before my mother died, and I really felt that my parents belonged together, and so I flew up to Montana, and I put my dad's ashes into Flathead Lake to be with my mom.
Wow. Notice the behavior. You see
Mhm.
what I mean? Imagine in 1,000 years from now, we're so rational and they're looking back going, what was that doing? You wasted
Yeah.
gas and fuel and time and you went and poured ashes in this symbolically. What did it mean to you? You know, these
Mhm.
irrational apes, like you get what I'm saying. There's some
Yes, I
meaning
do,
to
I
it to you.
do.
It meant something to you.
But one of the things that it made me rethink was I had really wanted a green burial for myself, but my husband doesn't want that. And I've been married for 42 years.
Wow.
And I
Congrats.
started thinking, you know, I really want to be with my husband. If he doesn't want a green burial, then we'll go ahead and do whatever he wants to do because I really think that we belong together in death.
Yeah. So there's meaning there,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
someone might look at that in the future and go, now that's part of the leftover remnants of our ancient human. And you know what? Cool. It is.
mhm.
And we're okay with that. That's why I want to meet believers somewhere. But at some point, I do draw lines at certain points, right? You're just being a not decent human being or things like that. But yeah, I don't know, like a lot of these scientists you bring up, and then people I've interviewed, and then there's many I haven't that talk about these things. Um, we are apes. We
Mhm.
are animals trying to find our way, trying to figure it out. How do we navigate this? How do we explain this? And I don't want to be this guy who's just against all beliefs just because can explain them. Some beliefs might be good and practical if we're able to kind of tell ourselves a lie that persuades us to do something good. All right, then what do we do with that, right? If we're able to persuade ourselves with something that helps us do good. Now, Christians will say, we're doing good because we're going to keep you from burning in hell forever. And it's like, that's not what I mean, okay? Because clearly there's psychological damage that comes with all this abuse. But
Mhm.
it's just interesting to wonder how, I don't know where to draw that line. I don't
Mhm.
have all the answers, but I do wonder how far do we want to take this? How far do we need to go? So
Mark Caesar
I like
says, "The line I draw is when my beliefs affects others."
in a negative way, I'll say.
Right.
If your belief is truly helping and it's good and you what I mean by that, we could get lost in the definition of good or bad, but clearly affecting people in negative ways. And I think that reflects in the way that people feel, right? We have to be mindful of how this impacts them and makes them feel about these particular things. This is where it gets really, really, really lost in philosophy because sometimes things we say or do hurt that person in the time, me as an addict, but the actual good was like surgery in a way. Like I was in active addiction. I did not want anyone at the time to disrupt my behavior and cause me to feel bad, withdrawal. All that was bad in my mind while I was getting high. But someone had to step in, disrupt that, make me feel pissed, angry, hurt to get me to get treatment, to get me to get help. So now we live in the truly things are subjective kind of world, and you have to judge based on each thing, right? And you have to do that. But how do you do that? You should base it off of evidence. You should try to focus on how that works based on an empirical world, not a superstitious one. That's my opinion. And as long as we try to anchor it mostly into that, I think we'll be on the right track as a race, as a human race. And, that's my opinion. So.
We are almost out of time, but there is one thing I really want to ask you, and I'm going to completely shift topic here, is you were either training for in the pastorate at one point, weren't you?
I went to a Christian college, and I was going to go into the ministry to be a pastor or somebody, who was teaching. I wanted to teach.
Did you have any difficulty when you lost your faith of changing career?
No, and yes, no. Let me say why. My wife actually, while I was at the college, was like, it's your passion. I support you, but you're wasting your time. Like, she didn't think this was a good career option to begin with. But because I also had relapsed on drugs, and anyone who knows drug addiction, maintaining a career, especially with drugs, not just alcohol. My father was an alcoholic who maintained his military career, though he went to rehab a few times mandated by the Army. He was special forces. He somehow made it to the end, and they retired him. But for me, drug addiction, I went down fast. I was a torpedo heading straight down. So when that happened, I sold like all my equipment. I had like landscaping I would do when I was at the college. I would go to the ministry to try and do good. When I relapsed, I'd sell my stuff. I'd have no job. I pretty much was a mooch, and it was not a healthy life. My wife was wondering how we're going to make it. She was waitressing at the time. She supported me for years on and off of drugs. And then I'd get a job again, and I'd be clean, and then I'd relapse. And it was like an up and down. So shifting careers, I was always manually laboring, like working with my hands. I was an outdoors guy, landscaping, lawn care, working for other companies that did it when I was, struggling. And then I got a really good job when I got at the end of my run of addiction, becoming a manager in construction. And I started bringing my computer once I became a supervisor and stuff. We traveled in hotels all week working. And at night, I started interviewing people for Myth Vision, but it was all hobby. I had no clue this would even take off. And I was just like, if you go back to my earliest videos, the worst internet, the worst webcams, crappy fringe interviews with like crazies and stuff. And like it evolved. And so I think it helped me though, because that knowledge I learned from the institutions of Christianity, and of course, reading Bible stuff and apologetics for years and years and years, helped me hone in my skills on the critical side.
Okay. Finally, is there anything that you would like to tell the audience that you would like to share that we haven't discussed yet?
Honestly, I think like there's just so much more to come. There's like so much exploration. And by the way, if you have anything else, we don't have to cut it off right away. If you want to do 10 more minutes, I'm welcome to do that if you want. But if you need to go, I understand that too. So
I don't need to go. No, I have no problem with going on.
I'm happy to give you 10. I just feel like if you have something, how about this? I'll reverse it to you. And if you want to pitch it back at the end, if you have anything you wanted to cover that you didn't get to cover with me, please ask away.
I'm sorry. You froze there for a bit.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but I didn't get the question.
Let me just reverse that to you and give you the opportunity. Is there anything you would like to ask me while you have me that you didn't get to?
Okay, this goes kind of back to the original question that I had with you about finding some of the guests that you do. What do you use for sources? How do you find some of the academics that you do?
So initially, I was thinking they're not going to give me their time. Just like you were thinking probably with me, like he's not going to give me his time. And I just put my heart on my sleeve in my emails and said, listen, I love learning this stuff. I want to know. I've read your book. That's an important part. I'm not saying you couldn't do it without reading their books, but like these academics put so much of their lives into the research they're doing. It at least is like this. It feels good when someone calls me or writes me and says, "I've been watching your videos and I'm blown away with this episode you did when you brought up,"
Mm.
when they emphasize that they know something about something, not just like, "I saw you had this interview with this guy, great episode." That's cool, but it doesn't impact me. When you say, "I watched you do an episode with this scholar, and in the 30-something minute mark, there's this amazing point you brought up or they brought up, and it really made me think. And so over the past week, I couldn't get it out of my mind." Like, it shows that it impacted you. That's meaningful to me. That's meaningful to them when you say, "I read your book, and you know that point you brought up in this chapter? I'd love to flesh that out more in a conversation with you. Like, you're a hero in my book, and I'd love to learn more from you." There's something about partly kissing ass, not
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
for the come on, because people like to be pat on the back, but
Mhm.
also just crossing over a friendly dialogue and saying like, "This is really insightful. Like, it's amazing. Can you come and express this to my audience more? We love what you present." And then they go, "Sure. How's the 15th?" And you're getting the email going, "Dude, he's gonna do it, or she's
Yeah.
gonna do it." Like, at first, that's how it is. Eventually, it becomes like less suspenseful, less exciting, because you're kind of like, but you're still, the passion's still there, but it's not as like, "I can't believe they said yes."
Mhm.
Unless you had someone world famous. Like, I
Mhm.
interviewed a Roman historian scholar, and she wrote what is it? The 12 Caesars, Mary Kay Beard. And I wrote her,
Mhm.
she emailed me back, and just by the email, I was like, "Oh, yes." But she said, "I don't do interviews anymore. I'm like, if
Mm.
I'm on anything, it'll be on a documentary on TV, but I'm sorry, I don't do interviews." And it was a letdown because she's like world famous. She's beyond Bart Ehrman famous in terms of
Mhm.
like popularity and stuff. So
Okay. Is there anyone that you would like to interview other than her that you have not had the opportunity to do so?
yes, there's several people.
Mhm.
Israel Finkelstein. I've emailed him,
Ah.
had back and
Oh,
forth.
yes.
Yes, I want to
Yeah,
talk.
that's another one that, I wouldn't even think to ask because he's in a different league.
Yeah, I've emailed him. We've emailed back and forth. He has shown interest and possibility, but it's never happened. And I'm like, we have to make that happen. The other one is I think his name's Finkelstein as well. Let me do flood story. This guy, I think, let me see, what's his Amazon? Irvin Finkel. So I got it wrong. It's Irving Finkel. He talks about the ark before Noah, decoding the story of the flood. And he has a few videos where he's just got this super gray, long beard, old guy, well spoken. And he just, one of the first guys that made me realize that the Noah story is so much of a myth, and the story that it gets its myth from. Then he goes into the ancient tablets and explains the boat and how it was built, and he just was very interesting for me.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. I just had a conversation with a creationist that we did it, via Zoom, and I need to edit it and put it out as a video. He did not want to go live. He had been live with me, to defend the Exodus, the historicity of the Exodus, and he found the comments too hurtful. He said, "Yeah, I
Oh,
don't wanna go live again because, yeah, the comments were just too much to take." So we did this over Zoom, and I will edit it and put it out a little bit later.
right.
Um, yeah, and the Noah story also is near and dear to me because that's the straw that broke the camel's back for my faith. It was listening to Aaron Ross saying, "We know that not only that the ark couldn't happen, but that it didn't happen."
Right, right,
And he said, "We know this from," and he listed about 5 things, and the second or third one was history. And as soon as he said the word history, the synapses connected.
yep.
And I suddenly
Something
realized that
happens.
what I have known about history since I was in high school proves that the Noah story didn't happen.
Right.
And I'm going, how did I not put this together? You know?
That's why they make the different tactics to localized flood to, there's variations of it. I've heard some that are really out there that I've heard through some of the avenues of Christianity I took. But yeah, I mean, what do you do when the story is borrowing from the story that's borrowing from the story that's borrowing from the story, right? Like you keep going back. And what they typically do that I found most often online, and there are variations, I've heard other ones, but like the most common one I hear is Abraham was from Ur. Abraham was from the region of Sumeria. So what if you have a Sumerian flood myth that tells us the real truth about Noah? And I'm thinking to myself, just read the story, because it's many gods, not just one, many gods playing a significant role. And there's some fascinating fossils, even in the Noah story, that come from this ancient story that I never caught till I really listened to Francesca Stavrakopoulou. You've probably come across her work, God and Anatomy. I've done a video.
I have not.
If you've seen her on video, you'd know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
In her book, she highlights something that really caught my eye, because the whole book is about the anthropomorphic. God is depicted as a person with a body, with an actual hands, feet, a penis, the whole nine. Like God has every physiological, typical what you look and go, oh, that's a guy. He has all of that. And what's interesting is, so did every god of every culture in antiquity at the time. Like everyone's god was male or female with body parts, the whole nine. Then this God comes along, and because he's gone through the ringer so often with philosophy that people think he's outside space and time and he's this metaphysical, non-physical being, it's like, dude, you do not even know the history of this God. If you go back, he has a body. Well, he has this thing called a nose as well. And if you notice very carefully in the Noah flood story, God like pours out his wrath. I mean, he like absolutely smashes earth with water, right? Which is like one of the Johnny come lately stories, flood myths. And then there's this point where Noah survives, and Noah gets on land, and he makes a sacrifice. And it says that the sweet fragrance of the sacrifice ascends to heaven, and the sweet aroma enter the nostrils of the God. Pause. This is the God of the Bible we're talking about, right? Pause. Go back to the other flood myths, Utnapishtim, go to these other myths. These gods do the same thing, and they smell it. Okay. And we have no problem saying those gods had body parts according to their stories. But here's the interesting part about it. Their gods in those stories created humans for various reasons, mostly to labor so that the lesser gods don't have to keep doing work, which meant, hey, all right, you guys are whining. You're on strike up here in heaven because you're working here doing the canals and all the hardcore labor on the ground and all agriculture. And they go, get us someone. So they end up making, in the various myths, depending on which story you're getting, the goddess makes human from clay and the blood mixed in from a god that was one of the people who led the strike on the high god Anu, or whichever variation of the myth. What ends up happening, though, is humans are literally there to give sacrifices. When we use the term sacrifice, we don't even realize that all that meant ultimately was feed the gods. They're hungry. This is their dinner. They need to eat. They need to eat. If you do not know this, you do not know the history of gods in antiquity. So when you hear about a sacrifice, this is a burnt offering for the deity to partake in a meal, a communal meal with the worshipers, with the people who are actually part of their worship. And so here is these gods in the earlier flood myths smelling the aroma, and what do? Promise to never flood again, because humans got to bring us food. Who's going to feed us? We don't have anyone to feed us. That's exactly what you see happen in the Noah's flood myth. God's pissed, and then all of a sudden he smells food. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been starving and then you smell that food, it can cheer you up. And he smells it and he changes his heart or his mind. Now, this is another part about anatomy, but in the ancient world, they didn't think your thoughts were in your brain. Right. Your heart is what you thought through.
Yeah.
So God
Or in
changed
your
his
bowels.
mind. Huh?
Or in your bowels.
Exactly. Bowels, stomach, like, and different organs played parts. So when his mind changed, his heart, he then says, all right, I shouldn't have done this. Like, he regrets, he repents. The text says God repents that he did this. Like, and he vows with the rainbow, I will never do that again. Hand me that steak, buddy. I will never do that again. And people miss it. Like, because we have so much philosophy baggage
Mhm.
that we can't even read our Bible and actually know what it's saying. We have been taught to not understand what this book means or what it's saying. That's what I want to do. I want to reverse the theology and philosophy and have you see the Bible in the ancient eye that the ancients would have seen it.
Okay. Very good. Well, we are out of time, and I want to let everyone know that tomorrow I am doing a collab project with Michael Beverly. That is not going out live, so keep an eye out on Michael Beverly's channel for when that does come out. Um, and next week, my guest is going to be Dr. Richard Carrier, and
Ooh.
we are going to be discussing comparison of the historicity of Jesus versus other first century famous figures. And when I first asked him about this, I did it because I had read his book and had been impressed with some of the scholarship on that. And he said he actually has some new information since he wrote that book. And so he's going to be presenting that on my show next week.
I'm using his article for my next documentary, actually. It's gonna play a part of it, so.
I was wondering about that because, yeah, when you were bringing up the, gosh, what was it?
Pagan
You know,
roots?
I'm sorry, what?
Is it the pagan roots?
Right, the pagan roots. Thank you. The first thing that came to my mind was the article on his blog on that topic. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it. He just dropped it yesterday, and I write him all the time. I'm like, "Dude, great article." He's a friend of mine, and while I
Oh,
think there
cool.
was probably a guy, I don't know. And, like,
Mhm.
he thinks there probably wasn't a guy, but there could have been. That's what he
Right.
says, so.
Mhm. 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 Okay. Thank you so much for coming, Derek. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, and anytime, message me, we'll schedule something out. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I've enjoyed this, and I hope that more people will subscribe. I shared it on YouTube community tab, so hopefully you get some new subscribers, and, you're a great human being, and I really appreciate you inviting me here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you to all of you who are watching, and thank you to you that are watching in the future for the view, and live your life.